This is Donald Parham. You're listening to Chargers Unleashed, part of the LAFB Network. Stay jiggy.
Hey, this is Chris Rupp II, Chargers outside linebacker, and make sure you check out Chargers Unleashed. Shout out to Chargers Unleashed, Sebastian Joseph Day, you know the vibes, we outside.
You checking in with Mike Williams from the LA Chargers, and you're tuning in to Chargers Unleashed.
You're listening to the Chargers Unleashed podcast with your host, Dan Wolkenstein and Jake Hefner.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein from the LAFB Network. Today's show, of course, is being brought to you by BetOnline, Charger Bolt Family, and Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia. If this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein, we are officially three weeks, 21 days to be until the 2023 NFL Draft. Like I said, these next 21 days, these 3 weeks are going to go by so damn slow, and it pisses me off. But if anything, it just gives us more time to talk about what the Chargers are going to do in the upcoming draft. We have a bunch of other segments that are coming up between now and April 27th. Obviously, as Dan had teased all week, the cornerback rankings for our best fit for the Chargers as it relates to the cornerback position. That's coming later this week. Plenty of other things coming to you in the next couple of weeks. Also, keep your ears open. There's a giveaway soon. But Dan, first off, before we get into the subject matter at hand for today, how are you, sir?
I'm great. I'm wonderful. I feel like it kind of reminds me of Groundhog Day, where like every day you wake up and you're like, other than the fact that there's one less day until the draft.
Right. Well,
there's nothing
waiting for the draft.
Yeah. I mean, like literally today, like the biggest news of the week so far, transaction wise, has been Will Clapp has re-signed with the Chargers. That's where we're at. I think we're hoping for these days to go by fast. We can get to the end of April where this draft starts. But no, I'm doing great. How are you, my friend?
Just counting the minutes. I feel like I should be one of those people that just sits in an empty living room in the middle of the night and just has one of those lamps that's like sitting right next to them. And then they just go back and forth from turning the light on and turning the light off and just stares at like a blank wall. I feel like it's getting like that bad. It really feels like it's getting.
You're like Will Smith in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You're just walking, pacing through the room.
Yeah, I'm just like, well, nothing's here. How much time has passed? Oh, 10 minutes. Okay. Yeah, we're doing great.
Well, hopefully we can make the next 25 minutes or so go by pretty quickly. A lot of fun stuff to talk about. We're going to talk about some of the latest news we heard this week. We talk about Will Clapp signing one Braden Fajoko signed elsewhere for pennies, seemingly. Some rumors about DeAndre Hopkins. And then also afterwards, we want to get into some of this draft strategy conversation because a lot of people are wanting to go a certain way in round 1, 2, 3, 4. But some of it might not make sense once you start actually kind of sifting through and looking at these round by round. So we're going to get into that. But first, Jake, over or under? Oh, boy. Over or under 4 quarterbacks taken before the Chargers? Sorry, 3.5.
What, did you just pull like the most obvious answer?
No. Okay. I'll get crazy. Over under
4.5. Okay. So that would probably leave the question of Hendon Hooker still in limbo on whether or not he's going to go before or after the Chargers select at 21. And in that circumstance,
I mean, the Chargers would love it.
I mean, look, ideal scenario, depending on what happens with the Lamar Jackson situation, Baltimore is picking right after the Chargers. If there is a quarterback needy team that feels like they need to come up and grab Hendon Hooker, I mean, what would you do? Would you count it? Are we counting before 21, or are we including that if the Chargers trade back and
let's include 21. Good call. Good qualifier.
I will. We're 3 weeks out. And as much as all the arrows are pointing to the Chargers trading back, considering the fact that history currently isn't on their side, for the standpoint is that Tom Telesco has never executed a trade back in his GM tender, I'm going to go under on this one. I'm going to go
21.5. You're going under.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about our friends. Bet online. Pay the bills.
Bet Online, everyone, remains your number one source for all of your sports betting needs this season or any season in the future. Always the fastest and easiest ways to bet on all of your favorite sports and events. Whether you're a football fan of the NBA, hockey, MMA, tennis, boxing, or even golf, head on over to betonline.ag to join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use that promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your rewards. Bet Online, where the game starts.
So, Jake, last couple days, we've seen some things transpire.
Yes.
We saw Will Clapp today was re-signed by the Chargers, give the Chargers some flexibility going to the draft for the offensive line depth. Again, kind of a backup center, interior offensive line guy that can help out. So overall, I thought that was, a good move, smart, relatively inexpensive. I don't think it's a bad idea. Anything that perk your fancy?
I mean, look, it's as far as offensive line depth, which the Chargers are obviously going to prioritize in getting more depth behind the offensive line that they currently have. Will Clapp was serviceable. He's a versatile offensive lineman, can play either center or guard. So you value that versatility, especially if you're the Chargers. And, you would still hope that you don't have to have him come in for one Corey Linsley in the future, but all things considered, I thought it was a good re-signing, someone who has familiarity with the offense and a good versatile depth piece for them that they're going to need on that offensive line. And it does not restrict them from addressing the offensive line in this upcoming draft. Not at all.
Yep. Some Chargers fans might be a little upset. They might throw a little shade at the fact that the Chargers let go of Brandon Fajogo. That's one.
Oh, are you talking about me? And as far as the ones
hey,
being
I'm not mentioning names, but Brandon Fajogo signed with the Steelers, as we all know. Terms came out, and Jake, I think it was under $1 million.
According to Over the Cap, what I am reading here is that he is basically going to count for $940,000 in 2023 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it was
cap space?
It was a 1-year deal. I mean, it may be capped, but that might be even the entirety of the contract. I mean, what I'm reading here, Fajoko's 1-year deal worth the league minimum of $940K.
So,
right, you can throw as many questions as you want, and they're probably all going to be valid in that circumstance. I don't want to beat a dead horse because I know that I have repeatedly, been one of Fajoko's greatest champions with this team. Going all the way back to his dedication and work ethic that he put into training camp last year. And then to see his whole path of basically making the final 53, then getting sent back down to the practice squad. Then, of course, after the Jerry Tillery, after 4 other interior defensive linemen basically are not on the team anymore from either getting released or by injury, then the Chargers feel that this would be the right time to elevate Fajoko. And look, was he able to put a stop to the run defense? No, but was he one of your better interior defensive linemen when it came to stopping the run? Sure.
I mean, it's relative. Like, I think the thing the Chargers fans have to keep in mind is like the Chargers' run defense was not good last year, with or without Brandon Fajoko.
Yes, when it comes to stats, I know stats don't lie. They don't tell the full story, but they don't lie either. And yes, that is a fact. But now when you look at what the Chargers' interior defensive line depth looks like,
I mean, is it that bad? They've got
you have Austin Johnson, and Tito are coming back off of injuries.
That's 4 already.
Okay. So
Christian Covington, I believe, is coming back.
Okay.
That's 5.
So you tell me, so that's basically the same group of guys on your interior of your defensive line. And are you expecting different results? Obviously, one could hope that
I'm expecting to see a better Tito Agmania. I think he was looking good before he got hurt.
But look, when it comes to stopping the run and at the value of this contract,
I'm not saying they shouldn't have done it for $1 million. I'm just saying realistically, we're talking about like interior defensive line 4 at best.
Yeah,
at best. So like, I know people are going to be upset. People are going to, but like, let's just put it in perspective of what position we're talking about here. Then Jake, news out of left field came out yesterday. We saw an article out of Sports Illustrated. Chargers fans have been clamoring for wide receiver help for years. And a weird article came out from Sports Illustrated saying that the Chargers are one of the teams to look for with a one DeAndre Hopkins, perennial Pro Bowler, All Pro. Then Dan Orlovsky talked about it a little bit from ESPN. And then furthermore, there was a podcast where they noted that sources were saying that DeAndre Hopkins is looking to go to either LA with the Chargers and Justin Herbert or Jacksonville with Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence. In my opinion, he wants to win now, wants to go to a superstar quarterback. He's not cheap. I mean, look, is it possible? 100%. Anything's possible. Is it likely? I mean, it's more likely today than yesterday. But in order for this to happen, Jake, in my eyes, a couple things have to happen. Either he gets released and he takes a substantial pay cut to go to LA, or Chargers trade late round pick and then figure out a way to restructure some of the people and get him on the team. But in my eyes, I do not see them bringing him on the team at his current salary, which I think is something crazy like 20 million something this year. There's no way.
It's impossible. Look,
that would be 3 receivers on your squad, each at 20 million-ish.
The Arizona Cardinals, for a variety of different reasons, whether we're talking about the players on the field or the front office, are an organization that needs to fix itself in a variety of different ways. Let's just be honest about that. Mm-hmm. So, first of all,
money aside, do you like the fit? Money aside.
I mean, who wouldn't? I get it. Money aside.
Sure. Some people don't.
Well, I mean, look, I can understand it because of the standpoint that you have Mike Williams already, and that DeAndre Hopkins is, while he could be better in a variety of different athletic traits, that's still like your downfield jump ball type of guy.
DeAndre Hopkins?
Yes. Some people would say that you already have that in Mike Williams. Now, I'm not saying that they're the same athletically. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins has different athletic traits than Mike Williams has. But you look at this on paper and you're just like, there's no way financially that the Chargers would be.
I'm saying money aside.
I understand that. I said money aside. It's a no-brainer to me. Obviously, if money was not a factor, but now you put the money on the table, and whether or not he's released or you trade for him or whatever it is, it does not seem logical to me that this Chargers organization, who just spent time restructuring the contracts of Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, one of those who may not even be with this team next year, and then you go out and you spend I'm not going to say all of it, but a chunk of the remaining free agent cap that you have on the table right now, when you obviously need to sign your draft class. We don't know what's happening with John Johnson's market, any other outside free agents that are going to come, and you have to allocate money for in-season possible signings because you have to assume that injuries are going to happen. So given that standpoint, and obviously the Chargers don't want to put themselves in any more cap hell for next year than they already have put themselves in. So for a variety of different reasons, I cannot see them pulling this off. Yes, on paper, would that just be ridiculous to have Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and DeAndre Hopkins on the field simultaneously? Yes. But
Jake's pulling his best, like Mr. Wonderful Mark Cuban. For those reasons, I'm out.
Yeah, a little bit. But look, if all of this is, if this whole philosophy is, shit, I didn't even bring up the fact that the Chargers still have to get Justin Herbert under contract, so you have to allocate money for that as well. So if all of this is gearing towards building around Justin Herbert being the franchise quarterback of this team for this foreseeable future, then this is just a move that I would love for it to happen.
Sure.
But financially, it does not make sense for this team where they're at with their cap space right now, which probably means that the Kansas City Chiefs will probably end up signing him, and everybody will just, put their heads in their hands and just say, "Give him the damn trophy and let's walk away."
But that's my point. If the Chiefs can do it, the Chargers can do it.
Look,
I'm just saying.
You have signed your quarterback already.
Yeah, he's making $1 billion.
I understand that, but you're able to push money on that literally every single year.
Chargers can do the same thing.
But they don't have their quarterback signed to a 10-year contract, Dan. That is the one thing.
But they will. Different. Like, they could easily...
You don't know that it's going to be a 10-year contract.
They're going to make it. Okay, shifting gears with the perspective of how much is okay for you?
What do you mean, how much is okay?
For DeAndre Hopkins. Like, you would be okay with him on the team if his salary was less than blank. Let's say $9 million.
No.
Let's say 7.
I'd probably say, even if you can get creative with it for a cap hit of like this year, you'd probably have to, again, being realistic here, not necessarily what I would want, because I know the type of talent that he is, but being realistic, taking in all the other factors of what I know financially that the Chargers have to allocate towards, I probably have to say you'd have to get it down to like between 5 and 6.
Yeah, he's not playing for that. Maybe. Well, again, I think it depends on how much he wants to play with one of these two teams, and if it's even true. So We'll see. I think it's clear that both Jacksonville and the Chargers have a better chance of winning than the Cardinals. Can we agree on that?
That we can agree on.
Okay, great. Moving on. Jake, I know you are a big draft guru. You love this stuff. This is like nicotine for you. Even if it's every single day for 365 days, that's fine. Some addictions are worth it.
Thank God the draft is not nicotine, or I'd be doing one of those, smokers commercials.
Jake's on.
Can you imagine that? If I was to do one of those commercials, and then you would say like, oh, well, like how you got into smoking, how some of them do that, and you do it up to the neck, and you say like, I got too far into the NFL draft. I got addicted.
I get it. Stop.
I got addicted.
Jake, we're in it just like everybody else is. Mock season, NFL draft coming up soon. You see NFL mock drafts all over the place. You wanted to and I think this is a fun discussion to have. There's so many different ways to go about this, and there is no right or wrong way, but I think there is some more advantageous or smarter ways that draft strategies can be put in place to gain the maximum value for each round. And, I think generally speaking, we know what the Chargers need. And I think the priorities are pretty clear. Jake, from your perspective, looking at the draft, what positions are you very confident that this Chargers team will leave having drafted?
There's no question that you have to leave with another wide receiver, if not 2. You'd have to leave with another edge position, because you saw what happened when injuries struck the edge position. You did not have a serviceable backup or someone who could pick up the slack to generate enough pressure. Kyle Van Noy, who still is not with his team right now as it stands. We don't know if he will be back or not, so you can't operate as if he will. So you have to prioritize edge high, and this is a good edge class if you're looking for a guy to step in for an edge 3 position. Let's not forget that. Eventually, you're going to have to address the linebacker position, because behind your starters right now in Eric Kendricks and Kenneth Murray, you lost Drew Tranquil, you lost Troy Reeder, so there really is not a lot of depth. As I was talking about with the Brandon Fehoko situation as it relates to the interior defensive line, you're going to need to address the depth there as well. You're going to need to get some other big bodies back there. Depending on what happens with John Johnson in free agency, which again, we have not heard a peep on that front in weeks. But if whether or not he gets brought in, I still felt that when the Chargers were going to part ways with Nasir Adderley, that they needed to address the safety position in some form or fashion. And there are a number of different ways that they could go with that position group. And I will still operate as if Austin Eckler is playing for this team right now.
That's 5.
But
and tight end, obviously.
As we know, we're still trying to figure out what the hell is happening with the group behind Austin Eckler as it stands right now. And Tom Telesco has swung for the running back position in the last 3 consecutive years and bringing in Larry Roundtree, Joshua Kelly, and Isaiah Spiller. And so far, you just haven't really seen much of the potential of that group to see what they could be as far as being serviceable behind Austin Eckler. So you may even address that position again. Yes, Dan, the tight ends. It's funny from where we were a month and a half, 2 months ago, maybe even right before the combine. And obviously free agency has changed a lot of things since then, where tight end just seemed like it was one of the consensus, like that's where the Chargers are going to go.
It was tight end or receiver. Those are only 2 options.
Yeah, it was a slam dunk between those two. And now since you know that Donald Parham is returning, since you know you're still going to have Gerald Everett for one more year, essentially the same tight end class or the same tight end group that you had last year is back. So do the Chargers look to prioritize tight end in this draft? I say yes, but do they look to prioritize it as high as a round 1 selection? I think that's changed a little bit here over the last several weeks. And then finally, depending on what happens with Bryce Callahan, who was a fantastic low-end signing for the Chargers last year at the nickel position, does the team go into this year trusting Jasir Taylor to take over that role? Or do the Chargers go out and they find another versatile corner? If there's one thing that
do you trust Jasir Taylor to take over?
I mean, that would be a big step to take. I mean, as a special teams player, and when he was able to fill in those spots when the Chargers suffered a lot of injuries in their secondary, it looked good.
Yeah, he took his lumps as a rookie, but like he played pretty darn good.
I don't know if he's quite ready for that responsibility yet.
Yeah, I don't know if he's quite ready to be as good as Bryce Callahan. That's tall tale.
Yeah, but if there's one thing that we know from what Brandon Staley has told us is that he definitely puts a lot of investment into the corners position. And so I would assume, regardless of what round we're talking about, that the Chargers would address one of their selections by getting more cornerback depth on this class.
All right, so we got corner. The ones that you are, let's just say, over 90% confident that they're going to address in the draft. Corner, correct? Tight end, receiver, linebacker.
Yep.
Are you putting running back in there? That's a questionable one for me.
It is a questionable one. I didn't even mention interior offensive line, and I apologize because that's another one. You have your starting 5 that's already built up, but you definitely need more depth behind that line. So biggest priorities as well.
So biggest priorities for the Chargers, I would say, let's just go with top 4 or 5. Biggest priorities, I would say, receiver, no matter what they do in free agency, receiver. I think it has to be tight end regardless. I think there's no way they don't get a tight end in this draft. I just don't see it happening. Safety / corner, I can guarantee you one of those guys is getting picked.
In no discernible order, Dan, I would say the top 4 are edge, wide receiver, tight end, and linebacker. Because I feel like those are the ones where your depth is really questionable, and you need more players. You need more playmakers at those positions.
So what I think is important, and I'm going to bring up NFL Mock Draft Database Simulator, one of our best friends lately. What I think is important for folks to kind of keep an open mind about, and Jake, you and I have talked about this a few times. Like everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, a large portion of this Chargers fan base is clamoring, pleading, begging, wide receiver at 21 or bust. And for a while,
even I think that narrative has shifted a little bit.
But there, like, honestly, I think if you had to take a poll, I would say like the biggest subset of Chargers fans are receiver at 21, Bijan Robinson at 21.
There it is.
I think there's probably just as many people are saying trade down, but like how realistic is that? We'll see. And then after that's probably kind of like, I would say edge and tight end are probably neck and neck. But I think it's receiver and Bijan are probably the two most popular ones. And I'm not necessarily sure if people like have looked at what that means and what that means you can get after those picks if you were to pick one of those at 21. Now, complete personal opinion. I think the Chargers are in so much better shape if they do not go wide receiver in round 1. Because there are so many wide receivers available in the later rounds. And there is no world in which you can say you're getting high value at wide receiver at 21. It just doesn't exist. Do you agree? Zero world. No matter what receiver is there. At 21, it's a high value pick.
I feel like, and this is kind of an answer to your question, Dan. This is kind of more just a survey of especially the top end part of the wide receiver position as a whole. Because look, 2 months ago, there were projections and mock drafts and whatnot again that there was going to be 5, maybe even 6 wide receivers that were going to go in the first round. And we all know that this wide receiver class is nothing like the wide receiver class from last year. And then as we have gotten more information, as we have watched the combine, as we have watched pro days, and obviously after knowing the restructures of Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and you still have Josh Palmer there, but the Chargers still have essentially, as it stands right now, 2 vacant wide receiver spots. So you need to fill those in some form or fashion. You're not a team that is looking for necessarily wide receiver 1 as it stands right now. But I do agree with the sense of where Keenan Allen is at in his career that you still need to do some forward thinking. So now really I don't want to say maybe it is the value of the wide receiver group as a whole, because you see some people that were real. I mean, there were a lot of people that were saying that Jordan Addison was the consensus wide receiver 1, and there still are some people that believe that, but where his projected where he was going to be drafted has fallen a little bit. Same for Quentin Johnson. Same for, well, actually, I probably would say that the one wide receiver that has elevated himself probably the most in all of this has been Jackson Smith-Njigba.
Yeah,
he is probably the most, I don't want to say consensus, but I would say the most, if you took a poll, that most people would probably put as wide receiver 1 as it stands today. So many things have shifted as it relates to the wide receiver 1. Now, when you look at this as far as what the Chargers need, Dan, if I'm going through the top 4 guys, at least how I see them, Smith-Njigba, Addison, Quentin Johnson, and a 1 Zay Flowers. Again, I look at this and I say, okay, well, what out of that stands out as far as what the Chargers need? That's obviously Zay Flowers. And even Zay Flowers now may not even be there by the time that the Chargers pick at 21. That's how much fluctuation has changed.
Some people have him as like a top 15. You hear people talk about him.
Some people say that some people say he's not even getting past the Patriots at 15. So it's just really weird. And again, everything that we're saying right now in about the next week and a half or so is probably going to mean jack shit, because all of the whole draft value chart and position value and whatever you want to say as far as draft strategy goes, it's probably going to be changed again. But this is how much these type of things fluctuate. But from the information we're able to discern as of right now, it may not be such a slam dunk for wide receiver at 21. Now, if you were to tell me that the Chargers trade back a few spots, depending on who's there, you could be having a different conversation.
Now, I think that's an important conversation to have too. You look at, okay, so let's say the Chargers are at 21 and pick a receiver. Doesn't matter. Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnson, Jackson Smith-Njigba, or Zay Flowers. Let's say they pick one of those guys at 21. By the time you get to 54, the guys that would be available, which we'll show here in a second, are going to be guys like a Josh Downs, most likely, are going to be guys like Tyler Scott, Tank Dell, Marvin Mims, that echelon, if you will. Keyshawn Boutte, like all these guys are going to be there. Now, I'm not saying those guys are as good as those top four we talked about, but how different is the drop-off is the question. And so think about that. So if let's just say they trade back in your scenario. At 21, they can pick, let's just say they can get Zay Flowers at 21. Let's say they trade back to, I don't know, 30, 28, doesn't matter. Pick something in the later rounds. And you could pick up an extra second or third round pick. So then you fast forward and you could arguably get, let's just say in your scenario, you can get Marvin Mims and you can get insert edge player. Would you rather have Marvin Mims and insert edge player from round 2 or 3? Or would you rather have Zay Flowers? And I don't know many GMs are going to say Zay Flowers in that scenario.
I'll say this.
I really don't.
There is a small handful, because everybody knows my philosophy on what I would like for the Chargers to do. Financially, it makes sense. For filling a lot of gaps, it makes sense. I truly believe that the Chargers should trade out of 21. That would be my move, with the exception of about 3 players that if they so happen to drop to 21, that I would say, yes, makes sense. Stick and pick, sprint it up to the podium, and good night. We'll see you on day 2 type of scenario. But as far as the wide receivers goes, Dan, again, we are not talking about drafts of wide receivers, of these past few years. It's very, very different. And in the Chargers circumstance, because you technically already have wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, and you're looking for, at least as it stands right now, someone that could come in to give you a little bit more juice to hopefully develop into at least a wide receiver 2. This would be the draft where you can find a plethora of guys that could become a wide receiver 2 or 3. I don't think outside of the quote unquote top guys that you're going to have anybody go beyond a ceiling of a wide receiver 2. So as long as you address some of those needs in this draft with what you have, I mean, let's not forget, Dan, 50 receivers. If there's one thing to take away from this wide receiver class, 50 receivers were invited to the combine this year. There are a crap ton of wide receivers whose skill set is similar in one way or another. Now, you highlighted Marvin Mims, who's one of my favorite receivers for this class as overall fit for the Chargers, not just from the standpoint that he has speed, downfield playmaking capability, but he also has return capability, which all of a sudden the Chargers need because DeAndre Carter is not here. So the value of it, if I was to weigh the top end of the edge class to the top end of the wide receivers class, as far as what may or may not be there at 21, I'd have to side with the edge players. Again, depending on who's on the board, because nobody knows how the board is going to fall between now and April 27th. But I would still say, as far as the top end talent that is on the board for edge in this class, is better than the top end talent for wide receivers. And that's still why I would prioritize edge with my first round selection. And that would be I would do that at 21 if a certain player was still there. I may even do that if I was to trade back a few spots, depending on who was still there. But that would probably be my 1A priority for this team as it stands right now.
So I think I agree. For example, this is just kind of looking at this. We'll see how this goes. But I just came up with a random scenario to trade back so we can see what happens. Okay. Trading with Dallas. Again, this is complete hyperbole. Who knows? But trade pick 21 and 85. So Chargers first and third round pick, trading to Dallas for their 26th overall, their second and their fourth. So you're giving away a first and a third, gaining a first, second, and fourth. So don't worry about the fourth part or the third part. You're just seeing what happens if you trade this away. So Chargers trade back. Okay. Now, Chargers are now on the clock at 26. Receivers that are available: Jalen Hyatt, Josh Downs, Cedric Tillman, Marvin Mims, Tyler Scott, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Now, the part that people need to focus on is who's available now and who else is available with your added draft pick. So, for example, let's say now we wanted to go, you said edge, right? Let's say we wanted to go edge. We got Will McDonald available. We've got receivers, Josh Downs, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, corners, Keely Ringo, Cam Smith are available. Running back, Jahmyr Gibbs is available, which is an interesting selection. Might be a little rich for me at 26, but still, who would you pick there in this scenario?
I'd still go Will McDonald right here.
All right, so let's go Will McDonald just so we can showcase what we're talking about here. So Chargers draft edge instead of receiver at 26, traded down. Chargers now get an additional pick, again, which is, I think, the important part for people to remember. We have an additional selection now. Chargers now are on the clock at 54. We're not going to trade here. Receivers available. Butte, Tyler Scott, Marvin Mims, Tank Dell. You still have these guys available at 54.
Now, I will say this for everybody who wants to say, because I know that Jalen Hyatt was on the board when I had the first round selection there. Anybody who wants to say that the run on wide receivers is going to be on day 2, I 100% agree with you. And the projection that Dan is bringing up right now is not the most accurate thing in the world, because I don't think even with some of these guys that are still on the board here as it relates to wide receiver should still be off the board before the Chargers make their second selection at 54. So yes, there is a risk and a reward to it. But as far as I think it would be different, Dan, if we were saying, you know what? The Chargers need another wide receiver to pair with Keenan Allen, or the Chargers need another wide receiver to pair with Mike Williams. The priority level might be a little bit different in that circumstance, and we probably would be having a different argument. But when I look at this right now, as far as the play level of the edge as it relates to higher in the draft to get a little bit more of the premier guys at that position, that's where I would attack. And no, it wouldn't be wide receiver. And personally, outside of maybe one name, it wouldn't even be tight end either. So that's still why edge has consistently been my priority since after the combine.
Yeah, weirdly, running back, if it's Bijan Robinson, high value. I think you can get
that is one of the that is obviously one of the exceptions, that if he happens to drop at 21, hey, you may have to think long and hard, even with Austin Eckler on this team.
Yeah,
to turn that card in.
Realistically, at 21, high value selections are probably going to be, you could probably get like the second or third best interior defensive line. You could probably get one of the top 2 interior offensive line. Tackle probably 4 or 5, probably. Corner probably 5, maybe 4. Running back 1 possibility. Tight end 1 possibility. Wide receiver probably 3 or 4 is my guess. But relative, wide receiver 3-4 this year is not as good as some other positions. They're really not. So Jake, let's just use this as an example. So we're not 54. Again, we traded back. You now have picks 54 and 58. This is the advantage of trading back. So
right. And this gives me so many different options here. So many different options. Obviously, I can address the wide receiver position. I've got 2 picks within 4 selections that I can make a lot of noise here. Sidney Brown, who I continue to pound the table for, is one of my favorite safeties in this class. I think he could play more than just a safety. He is such a versatile weapon in this class. If you wanted to address tight end with your second round pick, more power to you. Go for it. Whatever it is that you want to do. And this is not a secret necessarily, as far as like, oh yeah, well, obviously if you trade back, you can always, fill more holes. But Dan, it's in this particular scenario where it just, all the stars make the most sense for the Chargers. If they were going to trade back any year, yeah, this would be it. I think the one part that people don't understand or look at the most is, especially from a financial standpoint, we know that the Chargers were not able to go out and sign a slew of free agents the way that they did last season. So you were able to bring back some of your own in-house guys, obviously Trey Pipkins being one. You signed a couple of other key guys that you had in-house. And in order to overcome the cap issue that the Chargers have currently found themselves in, If it means that you need to shell out an additional $1 or $2 million to sign a bigger draft class to fill a number of different holes, that is the easier way to do it financially for this team. Now, obviously, when it's your turn to pick, you have to pick the right player, which is the one part that we as a fan base always just sit back and clench our collective fists about and hold our breaths and definitely have a heart attack until the name is read. But this is half the battle in getting there. If you can acquire an additional, in this particular scenario, this would be ideal. If you pick up an additional second rounder and an additional third, the Chargers would be in a very, very nice position to address a number of different holes.
So we got 54 and 58. So do you want to go receiver now or our next pick? Like I think you go our next pick just to show who's still available. Like you can still get Sam Laporta right now at 54. You can still go. We already got edge. So we can still get Clark Phillips, Julius Brents, DJ Turner, all from the cornerback side. You can get Sidney Brown, who a lot of people have as safety too. You could, if you wanted to, get Devin A-Chain there available. You could go interior defensive line. You can get Tui Pelotu, excuse me, kind of a hybrid, if you will. They're all there. So, Jake, not receiver. Who are you picking?
Not receiver.
I think I'd probably pick Sam Laporta, but that's my guess.
Yeah, I'd probably do that. Value matches up very, very proper in that circumstance. I'd pull the trigger there.
Chargers now on their third pick of this draft. Again, now picking, because they traded back, they're picking at 58. Let's go look at the receivers. Do we want to do this now or do it later? We could probably still do it later.
No,
let's do it now.
I probably would still do it now to keep it as realistic as possible in this circumstance.
And the guys are available: Kayshon Boutte, Rashee Rice, Tyler Scott, Marvin Mims, Tank Dell, A.T. Perry, Michael Wilson, Jalen Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Jonathan Mingo, Trey Palmer, Charlie Jones, Raheem Jarrett, on and on and on and on and on and on.
Hey,
all of these guys.
We haven't even really touched on the fact that the Chargers, we have touched on the fact, but I could totally double dip in this draft if I wanted to at wide receiver.
They
More
should.
possibilities to do so.
So in this case,
in this circumstance, and again, because I probably have him rated higher on my board than some other people do, and I don't believe that personally that 83 is the proper ranking for Marvin Mims. And also, this fills a need for me at both the returner spot, the speed aspect, and gives me another downfield threat. I would go with Marvin Mims in this scenario. I would.
Over Tank Dell.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll go with it. So now
I love Tank Dell. I do.
Yep. So traded away your second. Excuse me.
I like how you're making this like an offshoot mock draft for me in this scenario.
But I think what we want to showcase is like people who are so pigeonholed and needing to go, it's wide receiver, or they have to go offense in round one, or I'm through with this team. Or if they don't go tight end, they're screwed. They're not going to get a good one after that. Like, there are so many ways to do this. And this is why Tom Telesco, Ed McGuire, this is why Brandon Staley, this is why these guys make so much money, is because they're having to process all of this stuff like on the fly. So again, Chargers are now picking at 125. Okay. You got picks at 125 and 129. If you want to double dip at wide receiver, Jaden Reed, Jonathan Mingo, Trey Palmer still there. Bryce Ford Wheaton, Parker Washington, who you like, Ronnie Bell, Trey Tucker is also there, the burner. Tons of guys still there. Safety, your boy Jahir Brown is there. Tertavis Martin's still there. You could bring in LT's nephew, Darius Rush. Both these corners are available. Running backs, you get Deuce Vaughn. Go crazy. Get your next Darren Sproles. Who knows? So this is the conversation is, in my eyes, and Jake, I think you'd agree, there are so many receivers. This receiver class is not great on the top end. So like if you're looking for drafting receiver in the top 10, top 15, hell, even top 20, there aren't any like blue chip receivers in this draft class. There just aren't. But if you're looking for like that next year or the tier after that, there's a grip of them. So should the Chargers in essence reach for 1 at 21, or you can pick one of 15 realistic options if they wait to either later in round 1 or round 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Does this accomplish what we wanted to accomplish? Like, I wanted to open people's eyes to this like draft strategy. Like, we haven't even talked about like linebacker and all that sort of stuff, but like,
I would hope so, because look, I know we all have our favorites in the draft. I know that there is about 70% of Chargers fans everywhere right now that said Bijan at 21, no matter what. And hey, I don't fault you for rooting for that.
If he was there at 21 and the Chargers picked him, I'm like, you know what? Let's ride. Like, you got a blue chip player. Cool.
But if he's not there at 21, who are you going for? What strategy are you putting your chips into at that point? Or are you just going to be upset that he just wasn't there at 21 and say, okay, well, my whole Thursday is ruined? What are we doing here? So it's just, it always sucks. And I have been a victim of it in many, many years past, where you get pigeonholed into one guy. You get pigeonholed into one guy in being there. Mm-hmm. Now, fortunately for the Chargers, the last 2 years, the draft has fallen in their favor in the high rounds. Rashawn Slater, followed by Asante Samuel Jr. in the second round. I still don't understand how that happened. Last year was Zion Johnson landing there at 17.
Khalil Mack.
And we were all collectively thinking that the Chargers were somehow still going to screw up that
Christian Darrisaw. Everybody was looking at Christian Darrisaw.
I mean, it wasn't necessarily Darrisaw. It was...
that was the one that people were like, don't get.
No,
it was Trevor Penning.
Thank you. Sorry. That's who it was. Everybody was saying, like, are they going to still screw this up even when the board falls in their favor? So you really don't know. But Dan, yes, beyond this, I wanted just to address that. Again, anybody's whose draft priorities that are different than mine, I'm all for listening. I'm not speaking here as I'm speaking that this is a fact or that I assume to know any more than the bullshit that I shovel on a daily basis. I'm not assuming that whatsoever. But I think as it relates to this team, as it stands right now, your top priorities in no discernible order would be edge, wide receiver, tight end, and linebacker, because your depth is so in need of playmakers at those roles. The Chargers could totally flip the script and go different depending on a certain player and take the BPA route in any round that they select. And then I think definitely rounds that you would be targeting the rest of those priorities. I think corner will be selected anywhere from, again, depending on who's on the board. Like, let's just say for the sake of this argument, if Joey Porter is still on the board at 21, do not rule that out. Do not rule that out. I mean, whatsoever.
Just because Brandon Staley's on your team, like, don't rule that out.
No. And that's specifically why. I'm not necessarily saying that it would be the right move. Joey Porter's a tremendous player as far as the cornerback class goes. But don't rule that out. So we could go anywhere from them addressing that need from positions 1 to 4.
Some position is going to see someone fall.
Right. So it is really interesting to weigh what the team needs and know when you're going to address it in that circumstance. Obviously, positions like interior offensive line, that'll be a day 3 selection because you have your 5 incumbent starters that are already set, and you just need to add a little bit of depth there. But and maybe you could say that for a majority of the positions for this team, but not as much as they are utilized. You need to rotate these edges with Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. You need some more juice at that position. You're going to have to get some more playmakers behind Eric Kendricks and Kenneth Murray. We all know that. At wide receiver, you need more contributions from a wide receiver group than just your typical 1, 2, and 3.
And Carter's not there anymore.
And for this reason,
on this team right now.
And you have to start thinking for the future as far as what it's going to look like with life after Keenan Allen. Same thing goes for tight ends. 2 of these tight ends will not be on your roster next year. So not only can you round out depth and get another...
Well, they're not currently signed to be on your roster next year. They could be re-signed, who knows? But yeah.
Sure. But let's just go with the thought process that they won't be.
Highly unlikely that both are going to be back next year.
And the one X factor here is the running back position.
We still don't even know what's going on with Austin Eckler.
Look, as he says, he'll, if the worst should happen, that he will be back with this Chargers team, play out one more year, and that will be it. But what have you seen yet from the stable of running backs behind Austin Eckler? Yet you still just haven't seen enough. So
nothing that gives you confidence.
Is Tom Telesco going to try for a 4th consecutive year drafting a running back in this class to
probably
try to get more juice into it?
Probably.
I think he's going to do it. But guys, I again, the whole preface of this is just to say, because I know that everybody's been talking about the whole debate on whether or not Tom Telesco should trade back or stick and pick at 21. And for a small contingent of players, I would say he sticks and picks, only for a few exceptions. But if the board falls to him and he's able to execute with a trade where he's able to even stay in the first round and possibly pick up some extra picks, hell, even if he traded out of the first round and still was able to acquire some extra picks, the value that he's going to get and the names that are still going to be on the board for him should be pretty good. So it's just a whole hodgepodge of draft strategy overall. Once you just really understand what the Chargers' needs are and when they probably will be addressing them. Again, in no discernible order, but if you were to just say day one, you could say it could be edge, it could be wide receiver, it could be tight end, and maybe even a surprise position depending on a BPA that may be there. And then day two, you could almost be on repeat. It could be wide receiver, it could be tight end, it could be edge all over again.
Yeah.
And just keep going down the board. But this is what I love about the draft. This is what makes it such a chess game. This is why people are so damn interested in it. And this is why I love talking about it. So, to Dan, your point, I think, I hope this conversation kind of helped in that circumstance.
And look, this is coming at it purely from like a BPA perspective. Like, where can you get the most value? Now, Chargers, Tom Telesco, Brandon Staley, Justin Herbert could just be like, no, I want Zay Flowers. Like, he's the one piece I think we need. I don't care if it's a reach. Give me Zay Flowers. He's good enough. He's what we need. Let's go. Screw it.
He's been in the war room the last couple of years, and I know that he's been very happy with at least the first selections that the Chargers have made.
So, like, if they just go, you know what, I don't care about BPA right now. There's a spot that I need filled, and this guy does it. Like, all right, is it a little bit of a reach? Sure, but I don't care. Like, they could go that route. And would I do it? No. Would I understand it? Absolutely. So the perspective we're giving is BPA. The team might go a whole different direction, but I just have a hard time believing the Chargers are going to make picks, especially with Tom Telesco, where they don't see high value in the picks, which is why we're going BPA. Jake, went a little long today, but I know we got a little bit in the weeds. But look, our viewers and listeners are worth it. Don't you think? I think they're worth it. Of course. Okay. Next up, cornerbacks, which love this cornerback group. Breakdown, best fits for the Chargers. Jake, I need some water. I'm parched, man.
Go hydrate.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go hydrate. Jake, I'll let you kick this one off and we'll end this episode. Go ahead. Take us home.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Again, really appreciate you guys listening. We're inching ever so close to the NFL draft. Unfortunately, a lot slower than we would all want.
I don't have any water.
I can't help you there, Dan. But from Dan Wolkenstein, you can, of course, find him at Dan W Sports on Twitter. Myself at Jake T. Hefner. Appreciate you guys coming in. Dan's going to go get some water. The rest of everybody, have a great Thursday, and we will see you next time on Chargers Unleashed.